It's a note and file item, so we'll move on to item number 6, consideration of an expanded infill development impact fee program presented by Darren Gale, Interim Development Services Director.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Tonight I'm before you to talk about our current infill development impact fees and a proposal that we want council to have some discussion on. And I know that we have a couple developers in the room that have some questions and maybe some comments regarding that. And so first I want to start with our background. The background was in 2007, the City Council adopted an infill impact fee for single-family residential only. And the areas with which infill occurred was within our former redevelopment agency. Last year in 2014, your community development director came forward and the council adopted an expanded infill. So it wasn't just single-family residential, but it would now include multifamily residential. Additionally, it expanded it beyond the redevelopment agencies, and what it said it was at the discretion of the development services director. If a property was developed 75% around it, then there was the possibility that it could qualify for infill. Unfortunately, as we worked with our developers, everybody believes that their project is infill. Doesn't matter where you are, because they would say, well, about 75% is developed around. And so we thought that there obviously needs to be some additional discussion related to this. On the next slide is, well, why do you incentivize, or why is it important to talk about infill development? Well, there's a few reasons. One, it's better utilization of our current infrastructure that's already in the ground. Infill development can be very difficult for a number of reasons. Sometimes you're trying to assemble properties where you're tearing down existing facilities and trying to redevelop, which makes it expensive. In other cases, it's just very difficult to develop around existing developments. NIMBYs, right? People that have some issues. One of the issues that it mentions in state law, why it encourages infill, is it minimizes the impact and loss to agricultural lands, which is obviously important to the city of Yuba City and our residents. Another issue is there's a huge issues with vagrancy and illegal dumping on these properties throughout our community. So seeing these projects develop increases our property taxes, uses existing infrastructure, and obviously cleans up some blight. It also is a huge economic revitalization for communities. As you see one project develop or one project improve, usually others seem to follow suit. I always use it. I'm always surprised when one person fixes their fence in a neighborhood. It always seems like there's at least one or two other people that fix their fence because one person did it. I believe infill development is very much the same. As a project develops, it encourages others to develop. So what are the proposed changes and considerations for council? Staff is proposing two things. One is a new extended map, and the second is a definition of what is infill. So on the next slide, we have the map, which a little hard to see, I guess. So the old redevelopment area is this light brown area. And then this new blue area is this expanded area. A question came up about how did we come up with this map? Well, at staff, myself and Dennis Cook, our consultant on planning, we tried to look at an aerial map and identify properties where we thought would qualify for that infill definition. But we wanted to put that infill definition in there just in case there might be a parcel within this boundary that does not qualify. The next slide talks a little bit about the definitions. So first, it's land that's been bypassed, right? That wasn't developed or really has been underutilized or underdeveloped. Maybe it's a vacant home sitting on a parcel or a couple parcels. That would be a great example of infill. And then it needs to meet these 5 criteria. The property has readily available and access to all city utilities. So it can't just have a water line. It need to have a water and sewer line immediately adjacent to the parcel. Second is that 75% of the adjacent properties are already developed. It's not within one of our specific plans or our master plans that are planned. that all of either a development agreement or reimbursements were actually properly executed and funded, right? So as a project moves forward and it is infill, it's not going to release them from the agreements that might be on that parcel. And last is that it must be within this area. The next slide is actually Crown Development provided this for me, and I thought it was a great one. On the third page of the handout you have, you can see it a little bit clearer. This talks about what our current, we're taking into consideration the cost for, in this proposal, a cost of what impact fees would be for a multifamily project within the in the infill area of 10 units. We made some assumptions that are on the top left. The first column says upcoming fees of 2016. If the council does not do anything as it relates to our impact fees, they're planning on, they will increase the final third January 1 of 2016. Currently, it's reduced to third. That's the second row of numbers. So that's what it costs to do a multifamily project anywhere in the city right now, outside of this infill area. The next one is your current infill fee. What does the current infill fee contain? It's a 50% reduction on the transportation portion of the fee and the parks portion of the fee. And finally, there's a reduction on the line portion of your water and sewer fees. So about 70% of the water and sewer fees are for the actual water and sewer treatment plants. Then 30% of it is actually the inline infrastructure. And you receive a 50% reduction on the 30%. So that's what's currently what we have right now today. What staff is proposing is that we would expand the map and create the definition. One of the alternatives that I have in the staff report is highlighted here in yellow under alternative 1. And what that would do is if the council so desired to reduce all impact fees 50%, not including water and sewer, that would be the calculation. And in this, it also shows a 50% reduction in the levy fee. It does not show a reduction in the county fee. We've told the developers if they'd like to see the county impact fee change for multifamily, they would need to go to the county and request that change. And the third one, actually, Mr. Takar from Crown Development will discuss that portion later. But in short, it is similar to the city of Sacramento, where on large master plan developments and in some infill areas, they only charge a road and levy fee or a park and levy fee only, and that's the second option. But like I said, this evening, our recommendation is that we move forward with an expanded area. We create a definition, and if the council wanted a different alternative, it could be maintain the existing program. Second would be this alternative option number 1. I can answer any questions that you might have at this time. And I do know that there are a couple developers and community members that would like to speak regarding this issue.
All right, before I open the public hearing, is there anyone from council who would like to ask questions of staff?
To the mayor, just a quick question for you, Darren. So if we're reading this properly, you got the current infill fees on the left-hand side. It's saying basically the total is $20,209, and then the alternative option number 1, with the 50% reduction of the pipeline portion of fees and 50% reduction of levy fees, it's coming to $17,634. And then option or alternative number 2 is telling us at $16,264, right?
That is correct.
And do so I guess all 3 of these don't take into consideration the county reduction fees of any kind.
It does not. It assumes that per door it's about $2,800 per door on the county fee.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right, at this time I'll open up the public hearing. I have 2 speaker cards, but before we go to that, is there anyone else from the public who would like to address this issue? All right, let's start with the first speaker. It would be Cal Takar.
Good evening, Councilman. My name is Cal Takar, and I had prepared a few notes, but Mr. Gill took care of the majority of what I had, so I don't want to repeat anything. I want to take just a couple of minutes. Number one, I want to commend you guys for looking at this process and looking at it positively, because it will impact the city. It takes a lot of courage to do that, because you have to deal with all your constituents that may be not in favor of this. But ultimately, the city will benefit with this by looking at this. I just want to, there's only a couple of items that Mr. Gill did not cover that I want to bring up. He's done a great job, by the way. Wanted to say that the impact fees, as you might, I'm sure you're aware, generally get passed on to the tenant. In other words, the renter or the what have you. That defeats, basically goes against affordable housing. If we want to provide affordable housing locally, the fees, by reducing the fees, that's a benefit to the community themselves. It's not just developers getting a break on the fees. It's about a community-wide benefit. I want to make aware of that. Okay, so you covered that. Boy, it looks like he's covered it all. Yeah, that's all I had.
All right, thank you so much, Cal. Next is Cam Tackart.
Cam Tackar on behalf of Crown Development, 319 Tea Garden Avenue, Yuba City, California, 95991. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Just as Cal, let me start off by saying thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this, but also thank you for all your efforts in directing staff to actually bring this to some form of traction. I've had the opportunity to chat with you all individually. I really appreciate all of your efforts and enthusiasm on this, and Mayor Dukes, I know you've made this a part of your mayorship, and that means a lot to us as members of the development community. I also want to thank Darren Gale, if he's still talking to me, but it's been really refreshing for us as a developer to come into the city and speak with Darren Gale as the acting development director. What was really refreshing about Darren was we deal in numerous other municipalities, and there's always a personality that you have to deal with. And as a member of the development community, there's usually two types. One is, here's my rules, and go figure out how you're going to mesh into them, and kind of have that other side of the counter attitude. And Darren didn't. Darren said, let's forget about this counter between us. Let me jump on this side with you, and then let's refer to the documentation, and let's try to work out some sort of a game plan. So we've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time. He has said no to a lot of things to us too, but we really appreciate your efforts and even your after hours in this case. So thank you. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about. Can you hear me okay? Okay. What I wanted to talk about was that when we talk about fees, okay, the fees that we're talking about today are essentially numbers coming to you guys, right? In other words, we're talking about numbers. You guys get the opportunity to absorb those numbers, right? And then you collectively make decisions based on that absorption, if you will, right? But what's kind of missing in here is that on any type of a project, there is not only just these city fees, okay, or fees in general, there's other types of fees associated with that. So as we're talking about fees of 20,000 or 25, or cash. We were on top of that as a developer on a project. We experience other categories of fees too, and we'll share that with you. So my objective today is to take this analysis, if you will, right, and show you a project, and then simulate these 2 or 3 different options and show you what the actual number is, outside the AB 1600 fees and any of the reduced fees. So, Darren, how do I put up the next slide, if you don't mind?
Through the man.
Okay.
Yes. I'd like to see if we can extend time beyond the normal speaking time for Cam to make a presentation to us at whatever reasonable length.
I should be done by 9.
I think we can extend that courtesy for a few more minutes.
I appreciate that.
This is an important issue.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is in our discussion with Darren, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take these new logical rules, if you will, and apply them to kind of a real project, if you will. So one of the properties that we have that is in this proposed expanded infill area is the corner of Onstadt and Kinney Drive. We acquired this asset over, I think, about 12 years ago, and the intent essentially was for this to become a legacy asset to build an apartment complex, and then we got lazy, and then the fees did this, and and then of course there was the market crash. Okay, but anyway, as we speak about this today, this is something that we have a real live interest in right now. So just to give you a little bit of background on this particular project, and again, I'm not here to get this project approved, but to give you the scope of fees associated with a project like this. So this is essentially 76 apartment buildings that are all 2-bedroom, 2-bath. There's a little community building here for all the tenants to either have birthday parties or homework for their kids or whatever. So this is something that we had talked to Aaron Bush about over the years, and when we got the original fees back in 2008 or 2009, they were approaching as high as $32,000 a door. But then with your guys' efforts and some of the rollbacks we've done, things are looking better. But anyway, so this project right here, I want to apply this new fee structure to a project like this. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this right here is a slide that we just looked at, where we're saying, hey, we've got the current infill fees, all right, and then here was the alternative 1, and this was the alternative 2, and actually before Darren and I started, I had alternative 8, so he's whittled me all the way back down to alternative 2. Okay, but anyway, so let's go to the next slide, and let me share with you the 2 different scenarios that I'm going to focus on, because that was all that was really in the staff report, was what Darren had labeled as the current infill fees and then the alternative option 1. Okay, so if we simulate what our true 100% fees would be before we actually put a shovel in the ground, is there's different categories. What's highlighted here in yellow is essentially the subject matter of today. Okay, now every project is a little bit different in that Darren's simulation makes the assumption of a water hookup for every unit, whereas when we had set up this project, we were looking at water hookups at more of just a larger scale where it would service the entire project. Okay, so we're not an exact match in some ways. Okay, but if we take Darren's proposed infill fees right now, the only thing that's changing for us right now is the sewer connection fees and the impact fee. Okay. Now I have also highlighted in yellow the water connection fees. However, we have not revisited this with Public Works, but more than likely we're going to need these hookups. Okay. So when you look at all of these fees, the yellow is what's being discussed tonight. Okay. All these other fees are fees that we have a fee estimate for the city. And just as we were looking at that diagram that identified all the buildings, this is like for building A, building B, building C, and then there's this one community building here. So that's how all the fees are broken down into these columns. The green right here shows the levy impact fee, okay, which I think that we should maybe make that subject matter and re-examine it with all this levy progress that we've had. So this is what is with the current levy fee that I'd like to propose that we evaluate further. Okay, so really there's a school tax, okay, which I think is a great fee. Okay, it's $190,000. But all the fees that Darren, or that we're talking about changing today, are fees that we could define as vertical fees. Okay, in other words, these are fees that when we come to the city to actually pull our building permit, that's the check that we have to cut. It's just for the vertical component. Okay, but on a project like this is that we have a lot of what we would call our horizontal fees. Okay, and again, this is all revenue coming to the city. You know, there's a sewer extension fee, a water extension fee. You know, this is pretty much all of the different types of fees. So with what we were looking at on, can we go back one slide? On this option here, where we're saying that, you know, our fees are going to be about 20,000. They're actually, can we go back the other way? Thanks. Is they're actually at like 22,000 by the time that's all done. Okay. Now, one of the things that concerns us as a developer is that we have a building valuation on this as defined by the city of Yuba City at $6.5 million. But then our fees right now are at 1.7. So that basically is a fee of $22,000 a door for a unit, for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. So when you take the percentage of the fees, basically $26.74 out of every $100 that we're putting into this project is going to go towards fees. Okay, so so that's how the current infill simulation plays out. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, okay, this is Darren's proposed alternative number 1 fees. Okay, again, the same logic that we talked about. What's yellow is what we're talking about changing. Okay. That gets us down to about $20,000 a door, okay, with a 23.74% versus the valuation, okay. So you know, it's still kind of high, but can we go to the next slide? I forgot what I had next. Okay. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to chat with you to say, because we're active in other municipalities. And have been in infill areas, okay? This slide right here identifies, and again, this although it says 3/9/2015, this is before all your guys' previous efforts to lower the fees. But at one point in time, when Aaron Bush and I first sat down, you know, we were looking at fees of $31,000 a door, or 37% of its valuation, okay? Now, Sacramento, and I'm not trying to compare Yuba City to Sacramento, but I'm just trying to give an example of what some other municipalities have done on an infill program, you know. So what we did is we scouted out a property that we could develop a 16-unit apartment complex on, okay? And what we did is we went through the fee process with the city of Sacramento, and the total fees that they came out to was $14,000 a door. Okay, 14% versus its valuation. Okay, so I mean, obviously we're from Yuba City. We love Yuba City. We want to develop in Yuba City. But if we purely put our business hat on, our business hat says, you know, let's maybe do something in Sacramento where the fees are about $14,000 a door. Because another thing that we need to recognize also is that, you know, our rent levels over here are going to be a lot higher. Okay, but again, I'm not trying to beat you guys up or anything. I'm just saying that this is an example of what I've seen in the city of Sacramento. Okay. Okay. Is there another slide? There's my next slide. Okay. So here's what I want to do. Could we go back to infill? There you go. Oh, the other one. The next one. Okay. I'm sorry, go to the next. Okay, right there. Okay, so whether it's alternative number 1 at approximately 20 a door, okay, and again, this is our fees all in versus, could you go back one, versus the 22,000 for Darren's identified current infill fees. We just kind of like to give you a developer's perspective of this. First of all, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, I have to commend you on what you guys have done. I believe that with the new fee structure, and in some ways, whether it's the current infill fees at the 22,000 or the alternative A, which changes it maybe $1,000 or so, $1,600. Okay, I don't think that's a real big difference. Okay. I think that these fees are reasonable fees for single-family residential within the infill area or the newly proposed infill area. So here is what we are asking for today. What we're asking for is, again, great job. I can buy into that for a single-family home, whether it's the current infill fees or whether it's alternative 1. That $1,000 to $1,500 a unit is not going to break the bank. It can either be absorbed on the developer side or on the buyer side. Okay, but for multifamily, we're having a real tough time trying to amortize these numbers into a multifamily project. So our request essentially is that the levy fee, which right now I have, also on this levy fee in green, this simulation is based upon the levy fee being reduced by 50%, which is is it subject matter for tonight? The levy fee? Okay. Okay, so, so this is with the 50% levy fee. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm scrambled. It's been a long day. All right, so what would work great for us is if the levy fee could be reduced by 50%, okay? And then we would want to ask City Council if, and Darren had made it clear that, you need to go across the street and talk to the county about the fees. But maybe if there's some way for us to just even have some sort of a special meeting of some sort, just if we could have your biceps involved in that whole thing. So that's the second thing. And the third thing that we would ask is that, we continue this process and reevaluate the fee structure with more of a multi-family lens on, to make it more palatable. So that's my goal. Is there any questions I can answer?
Any questions of Cam? Or excuse me, Cam, at this point?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? John, if you'd like to step to the podium. You don't get a half hour like Cam does, but.
Actually, Cam did a lot of my homework. John Ochapinti with Aztec Developers. I apologize too. I'm not really prepared like Cam was. I got a phone call here about a half hour before this meeting started. But once before we were before you, I think just not reiterating anything that Cam went over, but I think we're all aware that there really have been no multifamily units built of any size or scope in this town for 12, 13 years. And I think another factor that really needs to be weighed in with the fee schedules is, again, you're making something available that we really don't have available out there right now. There's a new trend going through the United States. A lot of people can't afford to buy, don't want to buy. They want to rent an apartment. And really, most of our apartments in this town are kind of old, used up, and wore out. I mean, a lot of them are just old. It's not cutting them or anything. Were built a long time ago. People's lifestyles have changed, and You know, a new apartment today, most of them are at 1,000 feet and up, up to 1,400 square feet. And you know, I think Yuba City, I believe I think I've seen some figures. I think we're at less than $1 a square foot for our fees for to rent an apartment, and I'm saying on an average. And I think a lot of the areas that we've compared with are above that. They're in the $1.15, $1.25, and I know, you know, in some of the studies that I've seen, you know, where they brought in some of the Bay Area influence, gosh, they're talking $3-4 a foot on those units. I saw a deal the other day, San Francisco average 1-bedroom apartment, $3,850 a month. But that being said, I just think it's something that really need to look at reduction. You know, it's something that obviously there's a reason nothing's been built for 12, 13 years. And I think it's time to do a reduction, whether it infill or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the council for discussion.
To the mayor.
Yes.
Just one of the things that I think Darren could do for the public is describe exactly what the levy fee is that's being discussed in this.
So the levy fee is make sure I get the right number. So per door, it's about $2,500 per unit for multifamily. I'm using round numbers, and $3,500 for a single-family residential property. And that levy fee pays for all type of levee improvements throughout the basin. That was calculated back in 2007, I believe, and adopted by the council. Since that time, there obviously has been an assessment passed, but staff still strongly believes that there is a need for the continued collection of a levy impact fee.
So the levy impact fee is more for the maintenance and ongoing
Not maintenance.
Operations of the
Not operations.
Okay, what's it go for?
For improvements to the levees. So, for example, currently right now there's no improvements or there's no funding for the Sutter bypass for that project, which although might not inundate all homes within Yuba City, it would have a devastating financial effect on all residents in our county. It could also go for internal drainage and flood related issues related to Gill Sizer and other drainage districts. And as we've seen draft maps, that is a significant need. So there is obviously, there is not enough money to pay for all the levee improvements that our community needs. We're fully surrounded by levees, our city, and we're doing a great job through the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, but there's definitely the need for it.
I would kind of echo that being on the Sutter Butte's Flood Control Board is Councilmember Gill is. We certainly don't have enough money to finish the whole project that needs to be done. We have money that basically gets us down to Laurel Avenue, and we're getting additional funding from the federal government for about 6 miles south of that. But as Mr. Gale mentioned, the Sutter bypass is an area that needs some attention, and the state has basically told us that we're on our own when it comes to that. So we certainly do have a need, and our southwest quadrant of Yuba City is a big one that's at risk because of those weaknesses in that area. So it's something that we do need to collect the money for.
The mayor.
Yes.
I remember I was on the board at the time this happened, but I remember the discussion the city had as to regarding why it was adopted, and it's because there was no money coming in at all in any direction. So they took the first step, which was phenomenal, to get a levy fee. But then, luckily, we were blessed with the community adopting, the assessment and moving forward in a much accelerated manner than this levy fee could have ever even dreamed of. But at that time that was adopted, there was no concept that we were going to have an assessment, and it was a shot in the dark and hope that they could, continue getting development, and then that's when the bubble burst, and so that hope kind of went away. I agree that we need to keep a levy fee at some level or something. Actually, it's kind of a requirement. I don't know if it's said or unsaid yet officially by the Corps to in the state for qualifying for more funding. They've let us know that if it goes away, we pretty much drop out of the competition. And there are a list of 64 projects that they would like us to do in this area, and we've said there's about a third of them we could ever dream of doing. The rest of them are, we're talking billions of dollars to accomplish what they would like. But that's the way they talk to you. They try to scare you to death all the time. You guys know how that is.
Well, to put it in perspective, I believe we've collected roughly around $400,000 in the levy impact fee, and our current project is $300 million. So you can see that what we have collected in impact fees is just a drop in the bucket. Sorry, pardon the pun here, but it's a very small portion for the need that we have in these projects to keep our community safe.
That's why we needed the assessment, because the economy kind of fell up. The community did the right thing. But that being said, even though Gil Sizer and many of the others will be needing matching funds for grants and things that we can get for projects, because that's all this would ever be able to do is do matching funds of percentages. Its original adoption was adopted based on it was going to be the one that tried to carry as much as possible, and so I think that right now it is too high for the current conditions, because we have found a new path to get the major project done. I know housing, we're looking at the housing right now, our residents, but some of the square footages for commercial and industrial buildings, people look at that and they go, we're not going to be here, we're not going to do that. And also the competition we're going to have since A99 process and the Thomas has hit, they're going to be able to start developing. We're going to have to reassess what we're doing on that area also. Conditions change, they're fluid, and I think we need to really seriously consider what the fee should be, but we have to keep it. There's internal drainage and flooding we have to take care of, but I think it's not carrying the weight as much anymore in that fee. As soon as we get our 200-year, building will come up, and we'll start getting that fee built up at a lower rate anyway. So I think it's a big mix right now of what we're going to do in the next 2 years. There's going to be changes in this even then. So,
all right. Other comments?
Say that we do need to continue the levy fee in order to continue the improvements and the maintaining and so forth. But I also believe, just being a planning commissioner for 10 years, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I had indicated through our director, Aaron, to look at our impact fees and start considering, because it has been 2007, 2008. So I would agree that we need to definitely take a look and move forward so that we can look at what's going on now.
The mayor?
Yes.
Just a couple of comments. I think you guys have all hit the thing up pretty much. These are fees that we haven't looked at in a long time. We were able to reduce the housing fees. We were able to give the housing market a break on those fees because we needed to have development. We wanted to have planned growth. And one thing that we didn't want in this community was what we consider hodgepodge development, leapfrog development. And some of these projects that we're talking about today are infill projects. There's a lot of garbage being dumped, sofas being dumped. Like you mentioned, we've already got city water, city sewer, some of that stuff coming across. So, and I think Mr. John Ochpini just mentioned, and TACars have mentioned that why haven't we had any of these apartment buildings? Why haven't we built these projects in the last 10 to 12 years? Well, economics didn't allow it, and then secondly, the fees were too high at that point in time. One of the things that we haven't done, I'm sure our new director will look at doing this, is having a general plan update to see what our real fees are, because when we project our fees, we project them for a 20 or 25-year build-out, and that build-out isn't coming right now, so are these really going to be our fees? But it's a great place to start. It's a great place to bring the fees kind of into line. We may not be where Sacramento is today, but it gives us a starting point to take a look at. Having been on the flood committee as well, I think one of the biggest projects in our entire community, as well as in the state of California, is our levee project. and we've been racing against time. We've been racing against the dollars. We've been racing against hurdles that are too long to even talk about trying to get this project done in a timely manner. So I think we can look at fees that maybe were a little higher in the beginning that we can lower back, but it may not be the best fees in the sense to get it, but at least it gets the ball rolling, and we can always come back and revisit at that point in time and say, hey, is there other areas that we can really bring it into line? But I honestly believe, I think Darren's proposal was 22,019, and I think option one was 20,000 something, and I think if you're able to go knock the county on other fees, you're going to be under the $20,000. You'd be in the 19,000 in that per door versus 37,000 per door. It kind of brings it into line a little bit. So I would be supportive somewhere in between there.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The fee we're talking about, the AB 1600 study fees. I think people need to know what the cost would be, perhaps, to go back and look at that. You have a kind of a guesstimate?
6 figures, so 100,000, I think, is about the cost that's communities usually budget for updating your AB 1600 study, and somewhere between, I've seen cities be 6 months to 18 months, the average time that it normally takes to update your impact fees. Of course, that'd be after you look at your general plan.
Right, and so the general plan and the cost, you have to do that, and that's 6 figures in the more $350,000 range for a complete one. So that we don't have time for that right now to do that, but that's what we're going to be looking at the next couple of years. So,
as we go back and forth between these different alternatives, different options here, I'll just throw this out that in looking at these different options between option 1 and option 2 here, or the current infill fees, I'm feeling comfortable with option number 1 from the standpoint that when we look at option number 2, it takes out the police fee, the fire fee, the civic center fee, corporate yard fee, and library. And I think these are important things for our community. When we look at fees or taxes, however you want to structure this, but developers are in the business of developing projects like was talked about here tonight, and that's good for our community. But when we look at the AB 1600 study, we look at our general plan, that's what we want to aspire to be when we grow up. So as a council, we're in the business of growing a community, building a community. So there's this balance between the projects and the individual projects and our end goal of what do we want to end up with? What do we want the value of our community to be 25, 30 years down the road? What do we aspire to be? And I think that, in my opinion, with what we've heard tonight, that I would be in favor of something in the range of option number 1. So I'll throw that out to the rest of the council and see what your thoughts are.
Mr. Mayor, just to interrupt if I may, of course, the way Mr. Gale has structured it is just to be conversational with the council. Of course, give us general policy direction. Staff will take that back and reformulate something for representation, which will also afford others in the community to come forth and comment as well if they don't happen to be here tonight. With regard to the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, staff will additionally reach out to agency staff for their comment, because I don't believe they were invited to be a part of this conversation, and they have, of course, as you've observed, have very much a vested interest in this. Mm-hmm. And then I know Ms. Diana Langley, our Public Works Director, may have comment on that as well. We're actively using the, it's really flood control fee. Levy sounds, give it a restrictive sense that it's only used for levy. It's not. We're currently using that to determine our urban level of flood protection that is required for us to continue development in Yuba City. Mm-hmm. Be that smart or not smart, that's what the state is requiring of us, and we're actively conducting that study with the flood control dollars. So, but whatever, I just want to encourage you. I think it's a healthy conversation. You can give that general sense. That'll give Mr. Gale an idea of what to go back and formulate it. But you can always retain the ability to change your direction later. Thank you.
Mayor Dukes, so what you have here then is you would like us to take the recommended action that is already there, direct staff to draft the needed resolutions for an expanded infill impact fee program as proposed, and then also add on alternative recommendation 1, which is expand infill definition to include 50% reduction of all AB 1600 impact fees, and then also the, which is not in here, the 50% reduction of the levy fee or not.
Yes.
And that is actually what is in their option 1. But I'm trying to do it the way is proper through our government process.
And that's what I, in analyzing this, that's precisely what I think. But like I say, it's tonight we are giving direction to staff to come back with a final project or something down the road. But that's the direction I would like to see us heading, unless there's other comments from the council. Thank you.
Through the mayor.
Yes.
My only comments are on alternative option 1. Would be, I think we need to look at this more in depth. Again, infill projects are, it's a community asset in many ways to get rid of some of these open and oftentimes blighted properties. I think that the opportunity to build new multifamily dwelling facilities will ramp up the other property owners in the immediate and adjacent areas to increase the value of their properties. They're going to have to become more competitive with their properties and make them more appealing. I think in doing that, and with all of the other items that are required regarding fire protection internally on apartment complexes and everything else, I really think you have the opportunity to look at a reduced need, not need, but probably a reduced incident of police response and fire protection, along with some of the other components here. Okay. I think some of this can be chiseled away piece by piece and get this down to a point where I think that we can be in a position to have our developers come to us and be able to provide all of the services required for those residents with a slightly more reduced fee than this.
You brought up an interesting point too, as regards to the some of the blighted properties that we have. And not to pick on you, but there's been a number of couches on your property and shopping carts and all the other things that people seem to want to deposit there. And you've been very good about keeping that clean as best you can. We used to have the redevelopment agency that allowed us to go in and clean up and do some projects on those, which is a tool we no longer have. So this is certainly something that is important, that allows us now to do something to help with those blighted properties that are in our community. So.
Just a question to the mayor, and I think our city manager brought up a great point. I think it's important to bring the flood control agency and get their input into this as well, because I'm all for, we want to reduce the fees, we want to make sure it's profitable, but at the same time, without having flood protection and having the 200-year flood protection, we can't build. So we don't want to compromise something here to give something over here. If it's only $1,500 a door, it may not break the deal here, but it may be better at this end of it here. So that's where we got to take a look, because as a community and as a council, we've been touting, and which is absolutely true, that the most biggest project for this entire region has been flood control. Yeah, that's one project that we definitely don't want to jeopardize. Absolutely.
I'd like to recognize the people this morning that expressed concern at the Chamber of Commerce and at the GAC meeting, the Government Action Committee, or is that okay?
Government Affairs Committee.
Affairs Committee, I forget that. And some people did express concerns about this step and everything, and I recognize that. But I know the city members that are served in the past here have been searching very hard for solutions to this already. And we've exhausted now everything that we could find to make changes to try to kickstart us anything and get. I'm going to use the word incentives, and those don't work. Incentives just really do not work. They're actually the ones that really hurt you, because then you really are taking real dollars away on an incentive. So if there's anybody in the community that has alternatives and ways that we can expand our ability to get development and encourage people to build and expand their businesses, we're open to it. Darren Gale, his door is open. His phone, we'll give it to you. His cell, no, he's open to it.
I am.
We encourage, and I know you do. We encourage you to help us out on this. This is our community, and we need to work together to find the solutions to this standstill. And I think this is a fantastic first step. But we have commercial and industrial we need to work on too.
All right.
Thank you.
So Dukes, we'll set up a meeting immediately with the flood control agency, and this won't be something down the road. We, if there is a possibility of bringing it back to our next council meeting, we will. But if not, it'll be the immediately following council meeting for it to be before council for a final decision.
All right. Well, thank you. I think you have direction, unless there's any other comments from the council.
And I only have one trivia question for members in the council, because as I met with Cam, we're talking about what was previously on that property. And for the life of me, can't remember the name of the motel complex that was in there, but it was a standalone units for a motel complex. So if anybody wants to fess up that they're old enough to remember what the name of that was.
The Motel Rancho? Not that I was old enough.
No, it's something courts, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if it was on-stock courts or what it was, but it was a multi-unit that was set back in the trees.
All right. Thank you.